Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee. I'm glad to see everyone, and wanted to give a quick reminder that we will be live streaming today's meeting to the CPE YouTube, and the audio and video are being recorded. So, Heather, will you please call roll?
Dr. Mohammed Babar, Mr. Colby Burks,
Here.
Miss Lori Harper,
Here.
Miss Karen Hoover,
Here.
Mr. Lucas Menzer, Mr. Richard Nelson,
Here.
Miss Vidya Ravichandran. Oh, she's going to be here about 11. Dr. Robert Statt,
Here.
and Mr. Kevin Weaver. I don't see him yet. Oh, there's Chair Menzer. So I will mark you down. You missed your roll call, but you can be here. There you go. All right. You're good to go. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Before we officially get started today, I wanted to make sure to see if there are any opening remarks you'd like to make. President Thompson?
Yes, Chair Harper, thank you. Good morning, committee. What a start to the fall semester, huh? You know, it's one that has some ups and maybe some flats. We are coming back. The presidents and I agreed on a mask policy, mandatory mask policy. We're pushing vaccines, obviously not mandating them, but pushing them. We're also going to be looking at, depends on the institutions, looking at how we could do testing. Some institutions have easier ways of doing that than others, but we also will have COVID protocols if people do get COVID, how to quarantine them and do the things they need to do to keep happy, keep safe. But we're moving on with our academic mission in a very similar fashion we did 2 years ago, except for those protocols in place. Our enrollment looks, you know, I'm happy with where we're at compared to where we were going to be, right? Because we were at about 50.5% college going rate, and then, you know, COVID happened. And then on top of that, there was a law passed that allowed people to repeat a year. So we thought we were going to be a lot probably lower than where we're at. I was at KSU yesterday, and I'll speak to that in a second. KSU yesterday, and their enrollment looks larger than it has in many years. So, and we're hearing some of this from some institutions. Many are flat, some are down. So we don't know exactly what it's going to be until obviously about a month from now, but we will report on that. Speaking of KSU, you obviously got memos from Chair Menzer and myself and others that talks about exactly a little bit of what's going on. They ran into a few money issues. We're trying to work through that. Don't have a lot of information to give you yet. Well, I have some, but not ready to share fully yet till we work through some other stuff. But we're heavily engaged. Greg Rush, who was my CFO at KSU and then came to work for me from the workforce cabinet. Actually, we went back to KSU for a little bit and came then the CPE, worked with us for the last couple of years. He's now the CFO at KSU again. I was there yesterday opening KSU as their keynote speaker to their full faculty and staff, you know, charging the way forward. We'll be looking at some programs of excellence there, ones that we could help build what I consider to be a strong HBCU for this state and for this nation, while serving a particular entity like our state government, like our healthcare folk, like building a strong education unit that can really serve, once again, the state. So we'll be looking at developing that. So as you all know, CPE is heavily engaged. I'll get back with you all to let you know what you all can do to assist. I've kept the chair and vice chair heavily engaged with this. So if there's any sort of other questions, I'm sure you can ask me or them. Some exciting news about our collaborative, Student Success Collaborative. It's up and running. Lily has done a great job. A lot of meetings, a lot of stuff going on. We are working heavily with our P20 moving forward in ways to connect, not just, early childhood through post-secondary, but connect with national folk to make sure that we're doing the things that are leading other states, if you want to call it that. So I'm happy with Amanda and Melissa Bell, who's a VP for student success, on a lot of the things we're doing there. I will also tell you our Gear Up, we reorganized Gear Up this year after, and this is not uncommon, after 2 or 3 years into a Gear Up grant, to look to see if it's serving exactly the way we need for it to serve. And so with that, we decided to do some reorganization. COVID helped that to come about, to be honest with you. It was a perfect time to really give a deep dive into our assessment to figure out if we're serving in the way we need to. So with that in mind, what we did is we moved really from a strong college readiness motif, still have that in place, but moved to a strong college success process, really transitioning between, as you all know, we've talked about for a while, between that senior year into post-secondary, but not just into post-secondary, but actually making sure that they get through that first year and moving toward a cycle of success to completion. And with that, we reorganized. We have now post-secondary transition coordinators. And these folks, these are 4 people working in our Gear Up region with several post-secondary institutions, helping the folk on the campus understand really the backgrounds of the students that they're serving in those schools that the Gear Up have, as well as helping them with best practices about how to serve those students. And these folks will also be giving direct services to our Gear Up people on campus. We have 4 wonderful people that were in our Gear Up group before, now doing this great work. And so we're really excited about that. This has been led by Dr. Natalie Fagan. And these people, if you get a chance to talk with them, maybe we'll get them by and talk to you at one of these meetings sometime soon. I'm excited about our post-secondary strategic agenda. I know we're going to talk about that today once I shut up, but I'm excited that we're really looking at this from what I consider to be where we need to be, surely by 2030, but we're looking at this in a very innovative way. So Madam Chair, I appreciate you and this committee for taking the lead on that. There's so much more to talk about here that I know we don't have time for, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Any questions for President Thompson? Okay. If not, I'm going to move ahead. In your packet of information were the meeting minutes from our July 13th meeting. Are there any objections to those as presented?
Move to accept.
Thank you. If not, they are approved as distributed. I guess we don't have to take a full motion on that, so we will keep moving. So now we're going to move on to the overview of the development process that we've been going through since our July ASI meeting. Since we met in July, the council staff have been working hard on developing out the framework of the statewide agenda. On today's agenda, it's our final review and approval of the state priorities and a discussion of a draft objective and potential strategies. But first, I'm going to ask Lee to walk us through the work that she's done, that her and the team have done over the month.
Great. Thank you, Chair Harper. So let me make sure that I've got the right slide here. Hold on. So as Chair Harper mentioned, today we really want to talk about what we have been doing as staff since your meeting in July. We also are going to present to you for your action the high-level strategic priorities, which really create the framework for the plan. And we're going to open it up to discussion about draft objectives and begin to talk about sample strategies. And this is where we really are going to be soliciting your input and advice and thoughts We're not asking for any action on those today. We will be bringing something more formal to you at the meeting on October 31st. And then, of course, updates and next steps. So the October 31st meeting, and then we'll bring you up to speed on the work of the Campus Advisory Committee and what we'll be doing on into September and the rest of the fall. So Heather, if you could give me the next slide. So we have really been hard at work at the council this past month. We have met with campus representatives and presidents and talked about the strategic agenda process. Particularly the Campus Advisory Committee has provided great feedback for us as we think about the structure of the agenda. And also they are really helping us think through how we measure progress. And that group will really be helpful. That's sometimes the most thorny part of developing an agenda like this. So we're very grateful to the time and commitment that they're putting in and look forward to reporting out more of their recommendations throughout this process. We spent several days working with senior staff and had in-depth discussion, we call it deep dives, on each of the proposed policy areas. We got some great feedback from them about how we sort of flesh and elaborate it out and think about how we drive action and progress in each of the policy areas. So as we start talking about objectives, that really reflects the best thinking of the staff at this moment about the best way to think about driving performance. As I mentioned, the Campus Advisory Committee has really been developing some thoughts around key performance indicators, as has our advanced analytics unit. So they're doing some great work, and we'll be talking about that at future meetings. And then they are also driving some research and evaluation of the state's 60 by 30 goal. That has been in place since 2015. There has been a lot of progress in this area, but we really want to be able to not just look overall at how we're doing on 60 by 30, but disaggregate it down to regions, look at it more finely grained. We're talking about specific populations within the state. So we will also be bringing back to you some analysis of the 60 by 30 goal at future meetings. Heather, next slide, please. So today we, as I mentioned, are going to bring to you a proposal around the strategic priorities, which we will use again to guide the work of the agenda. Heather, next slide, please. So I'm going to start first with a chart of what the agenda is going to look like. We talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, but I think visuals are always helpful. At your last meeting, you approved the new mission, vision, and values. And so that's in blue. Today, we will be looking at approval on the things in yellow, the overarching goal and cross-cutting priority, which we'll talk about, and then the 5 strategic priority areas. And the green is the objectives and some draft strategies that we'll be talking about in the second half of the meeting. Next slide, please. So you may recall at the July meeting, we actually talked about 2 cross-cutting priorities, attainment and equity. But after lots of input from staff and other folks, it was clear to us that that attainment is really the overarching goal for the agenda. It's not, it is a cross-cutting priority, but it was really about how all of our priorities and objectives within the agenda ideally advance this overarching goal. So we clearly want to significantly increase the overall educational attainment level in Kentucky to help drive a strong economy, as we mentioned in the description, accelerate job creation and strengthen our communities. So as I mentioned, the 60 by 30 goal was established in 2015 in the last agenda. We've made significant progress, and staff believes it's essential that we continue the focus on this goal as we look to 2030. And so we are going to propose that we continue on with the 60 by 30 goal in this next agenda. Are there any questions about this before we move to the cross-cutting priority? Okay, next slide, please. So we also talked about a cross-cutting priority of equity. So we are proposing that CPE continue its strong focus on equity and expanding opportunity for all citizens by including it as an across-the-board priority rather than as a single standalone area of the agenda. So this means that our equity focus will be woven throughout the agenda, that all of our objectives and our strategies and our measures of success will consider whether we are supporting and including all citizens, particularly those citizens from populations who've historically been excluded from or underrepresented in post-secondary education. So, we'll continue to disaggregate our key performance indicators to ensure that underrepresented and low-income students are succeeding and that we're closing opportunity and achievement gaps. But certainly we want to continue the focus on our underrepresented minority populations and keep them, absolutely front and center, as well as our low-income populations. But, as we think about our focus on equity and inclusion, we really want to begin to think more specifically about how to encourage more adult learners to come to college and complete. Certainly our first generation students need to be considered as we think about strategies to enroll and include and help these students succeed throughout their post-secondary experience, as well as veterans and parents and others. So, we just wanted to put this on the table as to reemphasize our commitment to ensuring that we leave none of our population behind as we advance this agenda. So are there any questions about this cross-cutting priority?
Hey, Lee, I have a question.
Yeah.
This, or maybe more of a comment. I really like the inclusion of adult and working learners. We've kind of talked about that for years, like how do we get more adult learners? Maybe that's something we can include in the future statistics that we track, like on the placemats because we always have a good section for low income and underrepresented minorities. We can always kind of track that. I don't know if we can capture, hey, and here's how many are adult and working learners, parents of vet or whatever. That would be an interesting thing to track over time. So that's more of a comment.
Well, and a great suggestion too, Chairman, sir. I think that's been an area of discussion, and luckily we have Travis Muncie on the line, who's our head of data and advanced analytics, and he can answer any specific questions about whether or not we can track that metric. But it's my understanding that we can.
How do you define the adult learner? Is there a particular age bracket, or how is that done?
Traditionally, we in other states have defined the adult learner as students ages 25 to 64. So we do look at it at that 25-year-old threshold. Travis, is there anything that you want to add to that in terms of definitions?
Yeah, so we do track. Well, I guess basically we collect the birth date of the student. So usually what we'll do is we'll calculate the age. So we do have the age of the student, and we usually, if on most of our dashboards, we'll have those age groupings so that you can look by age. But absolutely, it shouldn't be an issue to be able to add adult students to any kind of future placemat or any future information that we send to the council.
Dr. Stack and Chair Menser, first of all, I like the idea that we do that. I just want to point out a flaw in this. I'm sure Lee would say, don't point out too many flaws. I think we have to calculate it this way. I don't see any way to do it outside of that, except we have so many students in Kentucky that may have dropped out for 2 years and are coming back with children and a variety of other things that look a lot like the demographics of an adult learner. So it's hard to capture that, though. I mean, when you're counting quantitatively. So when we build out strategies and processes, we're going to have to take that in consideration, even though we may be counting a particular population group that ends up being undercounted. I hope that makes sense in what I'm saying, right? So that's the way we also need to think about it qualitatively, in addition to that quantitative count. So when I when you hear me talk, I'll use a number and I'll say at least. And the reason why I do is because I know it is at least when we calculate this group. So hopefully it made sense.
And that makes sense. And maybe that's what we can do is kind of, flag it and say to the best of our knowledge, we're at least at this point. But yeah, that makes sense.
And Chairman, sir, we will continue to look at that metric and get the best thinking of our colleagues on campus, as well as our national partners, because I think you're right. I think it's people don't even use the word traditional student and non-traditional student anymore because those definitions have kind of flown out the window with the changing demographics on college campuses. So, we want to make sure that we're appropriately counting, students that are really balancing life and work and family. Are there any other questions about this cross-cutting priority? So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to walk through the 5 strategic priorities. But I did want to give you a heads up before we start that when we talked with you in July, we only had 4 strategic priorities. We have added a 5th, which Melissa Young will talk about, transitions, because we really felt like that needed to be a standalone area, particularly as we're talking about transitions between our K-12 system and our post-secondary system, that there's a whole area of sort of work that needs to be focused on there. So Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the first 2 priority areas.
Thanks, Lee. So the first strategic priority that we're proposing is affordability. And this used to be in our agenda captured under what we would call opportunity. And I think that we felt like affordability was such an overarching concern of everyone we talked to, the board, all of our focus groups with various individuals, national, state leaders, campus leadership. People are really concerned about affordability, and I think that the pandemic has even made that more of a concern. So we felt like even though it was captured in our last agenda, perhaps because it was part of opportunity, it wasn't really a strong enough statement about how important affordability is to us. So we wanted to put it front and center. So it's strategic priority 1. And the overarching goal statement here is to make post-secondary education affordable for all Kentuckians. So we'll talk later about the objectives that we've drafted around that. But basically, this gets at, I think, what we all can agree is a crucial issue for getting to our 60 by 30 goal. And just some of the rationale here, affordability is not just about actual costs, it's also about perceived cost. So, just keep that in mind as we move forward. We'll want to have strategies and objectives that really look at both things. So we need good financial literacy training and good information about college costs and how to save and pay for college. But we also need to moderate tuition increases and to really moderate that unmet need for students. So those are really, that's the rationale for affordability being our first priority area. So let's talk a little bit next about transitions. Transitions was maybe the second part of what we formerly called opportunity, because transitions really deals with the readiness for college, particularly among traditional high school students. So are high school students making a smooth transition from high school to college? Do they have a good understanding of the benefits of college, of how to get there, what it means for their life, what career they're interested in? Have they been academically prepared for the rigors of college? So this all goes into this priority transitions. The overall goal is to ensure more students successfully transition to college and are prepared to succeed. And as Lee mentioned, this really came about because we're doing so much work now with the Commonwealth Educational Continuum, with this K-12 to post-secondary transition piece. Early college experiences like dual credit have been a major concern of the council. And I think that, college readiness policies we've looked at. So I really think that all of this is captured here in this transitions priority. So I guess I want to turn it over to Travis Muncy now to talk about the third and fourth strategic priorities.
Actually, Melissa, can I ask a question here?
Yes.
Or a comment? I'm seeing, as I read this, the number of adult learners attending post-secondary has dropped by nearly 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Have we lost half of our adult learners?
No.
That's what it says. That's what it says.
I mean, it has really been going down. It's a little hard to know if we've lost half of our adult learners because we don't know exactly how many how many adult learners are in that target population. But certainly the enrollment has decreased.
But not 50%.
Yeah.
Really?
Travis, can you speak to that?
Yeah, it has. Travis, go ahead.
No, in the last, it actually has decreased that much, Dr. Stat. And a lot of that can probably be contributed to kind of the spike that we received in 2008 around that recession, but that was kind of the peak. But since then, since that initial surge of adult students, we've seen a pretty marketed decrease in undergraduate enrollment from then until now, and it has dropped about 50%.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and we expected, like in most recessions, like with the pandemic, you would expect adult enrollment to increase as unemployment, goes up. But that really hasn't happened yet. And we suspect that childcare plays a big part in that and in people's inability to get childcare right now and kind of reduce capacity and also the pandemic. And so we're hoping that this starts to behave more like a, traditional recession and that adults see this as an opportunity to go back to college, which is why we were running our, some of our ads around the free work ready scholarship for adults. But
Okay.
We've seen a big drop there. And also our traditional college going rate has dropped significantly too. We're down to about 51%. And just 5 years ago, we were at 55%. So we've seen a big drop there also. And it was concerning enough to where we wanted this to be its own focus area. Go ahead.
Let me add a couple more contextual pieces of information around this, Dr. Stack. We're really not going through a recession that everybody thought we were going to go through, by the way. That's one of the issues that may have had some impact, but there's several things. Some of these people aged out of that category. And so they never ended up going. So it's not like, they just aged out. The second thing is that we were about at 57% college going about 5 years ago. Now we're probably way below 50 with COVID coming in. So Melissa's right about that. But that's for the traditional age. What we do know is that KCTCS, just if you look at their numbers alone, it wasn't that long ago that we were over 100,000 students there. So if you look at that number alone, now, some of these folks, though, have gotten credentials. Some of these people have actually gotten degrees. Some of these folks have done a variety of things to kind of move forward. We have more short-term credentials than we've had in a long time. So that 50% enrollment doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad. It just means that that's an indicator of what we need to be thinking about to get more of these students that we still have left, which, Melissa, you may know this number, Travis, is close to about 450,000 we still need to get. It wasn't that long ago till it was double that we were going after in this population group. So Melissa and Travis, can you give us what are those numbers now? Do we have an idea? that's within that population we can choose from.
I'll actually need to get that for you, Dr. Thompson. I'll look it up and get it over to you and to the council.
I think that also the transitional, not here as far as the strategy goes, but just with the whole pandemic, I don't think we're going to see a dramatic shift, because I think too many people are waiting to see if we're going to be delayed and locked down. And, you know, I knew several students that decided, hey, I'm gonna take a gap year, and they're trying to decide, am I taking 2 gap years now, because they don't want to be online, they want to be in person. And then the whole childcare issue is a whole nother thing about just tied to the pandemic.
It's huge. It's a big barrier for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
just
for the discussion.
And just for context, Dr. Stat, I just took a quick look at kind of what the actual numbers around that adult undergraduate population looks like. And Dr. Thompson is absolutely right. You know, a lot of that has to do with a lot of these adult students, they do get, you know, they are getting credentials quicker. So they do drop out of that undergraduate population. But in 2011-12, we were over 75,000 adult undergraduate students. And in 2020, fall 2020, we were at 38,000. So that's kind of what that trend looks like from 2011 to 2020.
Thank you. It looked like a shocking number to me.
Okay, now moving over to success, and thank you, Melissa. So, you know, this is really a continuation of our success priority in our current strategic agenda. But the overall goal, or I guess the overall definition, is to ensure more students earn high value degrees and credentials. And that's really the focus. I think we did a really good job in the initial success priority. But there is a lot of room for improvement. And I think, from the lessons that we've learned, we've really, hopefully with this new agenda, are able to fill some of the gaps that we saw from, the current strategic agenda. But some of those opportunities, with the original strategic agenda or our current strategic agenda, we were really able to close some of those gaps with our underrepresented populations in low income. But those gaps still exist, and there's still a lot of opportunity even in the overall metrics that are involved with the the success priority. For example, we still only have over 50% graduation rate for the 6-year graduation rate metric. So there's opportunity to increase that. And there's also other challenges there, that are being compounded with drops in enrollment and graduation. Lower income and adult, and then our expanded focus on more groups such as adult students and underprepared students. So even though we have done really well with our current success priority and our current strategic agenda, there are still other opportunities there, and there are still other ways for us to look at that. So before we move on, any questions around success? Like I said, it's really just a continuation of our success priority in the current strategic agenda, and just implementing what we've learned from our original strategic agenda and trying to make that even better and continue that success. Okay, if you move to the next slide. And then, of course, we go to talent. And talent is really kind of the impact portion, or I guess can be looked at like the impact portion of the current strategic agenda. But talent is really about that transition to the workforce. So hopefully with a successful student, if they're successful in their post-secondary career, then, the goal is for them to then continue that success into the workforce with a good, high-paying job, in the economy and workforce. And that's really what talent is all about. But the overall, I guess, definition is the educated, globally competitive workforce, and increase research and innovation to fuel jobs and economic growth. And that's really what that's about. So not only to have success in post-secondary education, but to successfully transition to the workforce and to make sure that our programs are creating the talent to really fill the needs of our workforce in the state of Kentucky. And we'll go over some more of the specific objectives around both success and talent a little later. So, you can get a better idea of really what we're talking about when we say success and talent, but that's the broad overview. So success in post-secondary education, and then that transition to the workforce, creating talent, that we need for our economy and workforce. Okay, and I will go ahead and turn this over to Grace, who will go over value.
Thank you, Travis. So the fifth strategic priority is value. And through this priority, CP aims to improve public understanding that post-secondary education is key to greater opportunity and economic growth. So some of the rationale behind setting up this strategic priorities that, as we all know, we are in an era of reduced public spending and increasing college costs, and there'll be arguments and discussions about the value and the return on investment of college. So we do think that greater focus and intentionality is needed to demonstrate why education matters and the value of higher education. Actually, at CPE, we do research around this topic, and we track a cohort of high school graduating class for 13 years, normally 9 or 10 years, to look at their early economic return on post-secondary investment. And we use American Community Survey data to provide a lifetime picture of economic return on investment. But we still strongly believe that post-secondary community supporters must engage more actively and strongly with various stakeholders, including elected leaders, students, families, and business and community partners about the value of higher education. So that's why when we are having this fifth strategic priority on value. Do you all have any question about this priority or any other priority for me and my colleagues? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Lee, and she's going to request a formal approval for all of those priorities.
Thank you, Grace. So in summary, Chair Harper, CPE staff recommends the approval of the overarching 60 by 30 goal, the cross-cutting equity priority, and the 5 strategic priorities that have just been presented by staff.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions before I entertain a motion?
Actually, I just have a comment, and that is, as we go through these five aspects, seems like they're all built upon early education, particularly in the high school area, where we've seen many times demand for better counseling and advising, that sort of thing. Seems as though that is the area that needs to be really strengthened to get many of these points across.
Dr. Stack, good look. I mean, the only way we're going to do what we need to do in higher education is to create a strong early childhood. If you've heard me say that many times, but of course we don't have the power to do that. What we do have the power to do is to create an ed continuum where we work with other leaders to, in fact, do that. And right. So this is truly a way for CPE to start thinking. And I so appreciate this team, Lee and her crew, Travis, Grace, Melissa, everybody, for looking at truly how this fits together from a backwards look at where we need to go in 2030. All right. I mean, and if you look at it, it's a very holistic puzzle piece that fits together really nicely. And I think better than I've ever seen an agenda. And I've been in Kentucky since 1997 doing this. So I think you're right. I think this concentrates heavily on that cradle to workforce mentality and looking at those building blocks, but also looking at, those potholes that have kept us from moving past those transition points. Mm-hmm. So I think your look is exactly right.
Okay, if there are no other comments, I would entertain a motion.
So move to approve the 5 priorities or aspects.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just can we clarify do you mean just the 5 priorities or the overarching goal and the equity priority as well?
What Lee called for.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure for the record.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So all in favor of the motion that's on the table, which includes everything that Lee had mentioned, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Thank you. Motion carries. We will continue moving on. Thank you all. I know that the staff and the team at ASI have done a great job in helping us as boards gather and get the information to help make these decisions. So thank you all. I'm going to turn it over. We're going to go on to draft objectives and sample strategies. And Melissa Young is going to begin this discussion. And so Melissa, I guess you're going to cover the discussions on affordability, success, and value. And then Lee will follow up with transition and talent.
Yeah, I think Lee and I are just going to kind of go back and forth here and hand off presenting to each other. But now's the fun stuff, right? Now we get into the meat of the agenda, the objectives. So these are very much a first look, very much in draft form. So we're going to stop after each set of objectives for discussion, because these are new to you. I would say that we certainly worked a lot with staff on these. As Lee said, the senior staff really provided a lot of input and direction here. So under affordability, we have 2 objectives, and they capture what I called sort of the actual cost problem and the perceived cost problem, right? So these are 2 things we need to work on. Objective 1 is reduce financial barriers to college enrollment and completion. So objective 1 really gets at a lot of the work we're doing in this area. Like we had the campaign to increase FAFSA completion. So that could be a strategy here to reduce barriers to college enrollment. The work that we do to moderate tuition growth every year, and to set those ceilings for undergraduate resident enrollment, tuition and fees. And some work that we're doing in the virtual library on open educational resources, which can be anything from shared, like free textbooks, to shared curriculum development that reduces cost on campus. So this is just a few examples. We could have other strategies here, but that's our first objective. The second objective we've drafted is improve financial literacy and understanding of how to pay for college. And the strategies here really get at a lot of the work that Gear Up is doing around, they have a financial literacy component. There are potential partnerships here statewide that we could have I know KDE has financial literacy training and programming, and we can do more to ensure that college savings is a piece of that, paying for college. And then, just making sure that advisors and college coaches understand themselves how to pay for college. I mean, most people, it's been a while since they've been to college, so we want to make sure they have the most up-to-date information. So there's a lot of professional development and information and resources that need to be shared there. So we wanted to try to keep the objectives, I will say, fairly minimum, just broad, to capture a lot of different strategies. I want to remind you that the strategies will be reviewed every 3 years or so. So the strategies actually are fluid, and if we have an initiative or a strategy that we make good progress on, or we complete in 3 years, and we decide we need to tweak it or add something else, we'll have a lot of flexibility to do that in the plan. The objectives we really see as as being with us for the entire period of the plan through 2030. Now, if we have to change them, we can, but that's why we really tried to use pretty broad language, you know, when we thought about those. So does anybody have any comments or want to discuss these?
Melissa,
Yeah.
Melissa, it was talked about a while back in the previous administration about having a semester course on financial literacy as a requirement in high school. Did that ever come about?
I do believe it did. Lee, do you have more information on that?
It did, Dr. Stat. And we have had a number of conversations about integrating in some financial literacy, specifically about paying for college. And so those conversations are ongoing. I know our financial aid directors are very interested in making that a more standard part of the financial literacy curriculum at our high schools.
But the curriculum includes things like opening a checkbook and, you know, a savings account and investing and things, you know, budgeting. So some really basic things like that too.
Dr. Stat, by the way, if I call you Dr. Stack, you know who I've been talking to. But Dr.
That's fine.
Bob, I've only known you for 1,000 years. Sorry, man. The thing that I realize is that we're going to probably have to beef that high school course up, to be honest with you. I mean, it's probably not covering as deep of a detail as we want to. I've talked with Chair Mentzer about this in probably more detail than he's talked to me about it more in detail I wanted to know. But he has pushed this hard too. So, but that's an area where I think you may be pointing to. Even if we have the course, we have to make sure we have the right curriculum and the right pedagogical techniques, by the way, to do that course. And
Amanda Ellis just texted me and reminded me that the current curriculum does include how to fill out the FAFSA. And I think that building on that to maybe a broader discussion about paying for college is probably something that we want to continue to talk about.
Agreed.
Melissa and Lee, I'm gonna do a Dr. Thompson. I only have 2 points. I'll make them quick.
He has 3 points. Usually.
I know I'm doing one less. I am a third less than him. So, 2 things I think these may be baked in, but it may be worth calling it out. One is not only in the financial literacy and understanding how to pay for college, but also how to select not only the right college but the right program. Right. Because, you know, if you pick the wrong college for you and the wrong program for you, you know, a 6-year degree costs more than a 4-year degree. And that doesn't matter what the price of the university, but if you just, you know, choose the wrong path for yourself. So maybe something on financial literacy and advising and understanding how to pay for college. And that kind of ties into my second point of, and Dr. Sad, you're spot on with the financial literacy in high school. I'd like to see that continue on through college, right? To the effect of, you know, maybe we offer a 1 credit hour a semester to sit down with an advisor financially and to do a health checkup, right? And that could continue on. That's why, you know, add the phrase maybe advising to that second objective, because it's not a one time, it's an ongoing repeating thing that everybody. I mean, I say that because I think it's good for students, but also that's just good for life. Right. You should be checking on your finances every couple times a year and making sure that you're on the right track. Right. So it kind of starts building that pattern for them as adults and, you know, going out into the workforce. Those are my 2 points.
I think a lot of that is covered in the first year experiences. When we do the CEO reviews, that first year experience course is always mentioned, and that seems to be covered in that area as from the college going.
Yeah.
But certainly, you know, Chair Mentzer, the debt letters that we worked on with the campuses where students kind of get a handle on this is what level of debt they have right now. And this is how you, the amount that you would be paying after you graduate, you know, that's all part of that. And that could be certainly a course instead of just a letter or somebody really sitting through and assessing like what major they want to do and how much that much they might make in their first year out versus
Mhm.
might be expected to pay in debt for loan debt.
I would say too, and I think we shared this at the last meeting, the strategies that we will be incorporating or you will be incorporating into the strategic agenda will be state level strategies. So those are strategies that at CPE we have some leverage to move. We will be asking each campus to look at these objectives. And this again is why these objectives are so important, and develop their own campus level strategies that support these objectives. In many cases, this just replicates some of the stuff in their own strategic plans, but in other areas, they might be called upon to be thinking about new approaches to things. So just wanted to put that out there as we talk about the structure of the plan.
Does anybody else have any comments or reflections on the objectives that we've drafted here? And of course, this isn't your last chance to comment on this. We'll continue working on this document so throughout the month, and we'll look at it again at the end of the month. But
Okay, how about next slide, Heather?
all right, so on transitions, we have two objectives. The first one is increase.
Melissa,
Yes.
I think Lee's doing this one.
Oh, sorry, we're going back and forth, aren't we? Go ahead, Lee.
Go ahead, Melissa, that's fine with me.
All right, you can do the next two. So the first objective is to increase students' readiness to enter post-secondary education. And that really gets at some of like some potential strategies here that we've talked about: dual credit and early college experiences, making sure that those are rigorous, that they are equitable in terms of who gets to participate, that they're meaningful to the future career path or degree path and not just a bunch of elective credit. The statewide student portal that we've talked about, which would be a sort of resource where a lot of different information about post-secondary, how to apply, how to pay, a common app would be all there under one student portal for Kentucky. And we've also talked about bridge programming. So all of these, that would be your summer bridge courses, if you're not familiar, that would help students transition to college and maybe avoid developmental education. So that's the first objective, looking at readiness. And the second objective is to increase enrollment. We heard this from campuses that this is really going to be a huge focus area for them. And obviously it's the ultimate test of whether or not we're doing our job in terms of transitions, is if people actually enroll. We'll be working on this at the statewide level through our Gear Up program that deals with students as early as middle school in college readiness and success activities. Outreach to underserved populations and adult focused recruitment. So this would really, include also not just the traditional students, but these adults that we really need to work on enrolling. So does anybody want to reflect on these two objectives or have any comments?
Melissa, I have a comment. The objective one, increasing students' readiness to enter post-secondary ed, with the dual credit portion, have you looked into offering that at earlier grades in high school, maybe 9th, 10th graders who just have high aptitude and are ready to take on college level courses? I mean, that's one way to increase their path to college and even expedite their graduation rate. Is that something that has been looked into?
I do believe it has, and I think that there are some students who do have that opportunity early. I know from a state level that we provide financial assistance for up to 2 courses, and that would just be in the junior and senior year. But obviously, there are a lot of students who take the, who pay for this themselves and can do it earlier. We want to work on that, like you said, so there are more equitable opportunities for every student, right? And not just juniors and seniors.
Melissa, let me jump in too.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Actually, particularly for students in CTE pathways in high school, they are getting dual credit dollars their freshman and sophomore year. So, to really get them focused and targeted. And one of the things we'll do at the next meeting is make sure to bring in our folks who are more specialized in each of these areas, and they can respond to some of these detailed questions. But that is a good point. I think to get folks, on track to be prepared for college, starting as early as possible is absolutely critical.
Mr. Nelson, let me add a couple other points I think is important. You all know when I took over, we went to a test optional minimum admission state. Now, most of our campuses are test optional, which opens up the pathway a little more for your exact statement. Before there was an ACT requisite in place. Now, I think we have to be careful who we are putting into some of those. And I'm not saying CTE is easier than transfer courses. That's not my point in what I'm getting ready to say. But we do know that in many cases, especially young people that are feeling disenfranchised from education, tends to perform a lot better in an applied setting. So I think there's a lot of student success reasons why your statement has a lot of validity. So I think we have to uniquely look at all of these as an opportunity to think about helping folk to not only look toward the future, like college, and by the way, technical is college in this state, but also in the idea to stay engaged in school. One other point I'll make, I got a chance to open up Ludlow schools last week or a week before, I can't remember anymore. But, for an example, they're pushing hard that senior year, who they feel may not be as powerful as it needs to be, to have most of their students take college level courses. And so they're now having 50% of their graduating seniors graduating with at least 24 hours of college credit when they leave. Then it becomes an affordability issue too, right? Not issue, but affordability positive, I should say. So there's your statement has a lot of what I call interactive positive elements that fits well into this overall agenda.
Thank you.
Can I comment on objective 2, and the increased enrollment in post-secondary education? From a faculty perspective, one of the things, if we get more students in, it doesn't cost the university really any more. If we are teaching 18 students right now in a class, or we're teaching 24 in a class, it's still the same cost. So it's a financial benefit for the universities without too much added expense to increase the enrollment.
That's a good point, Dr. Stat. Does anybody else have any comments on the objectives that we have on the slide? All right, well, Lee, I'll turn it back over to you now.
Great, thanks. So we want to talk about the success priority area, and we're proposing at this point 3 objectives that we would use to really advance this work. The first is to increase persistence in and timely completion of post-secondary programs. This really carries over from our current agenda. This is all about ensuring that students are being retained, they're progressing, and they're completing their programs in a timely manner. I think that there are a raft of effective strategies that we could look at here. Certainly, leading the list is the implementation of high impact practices in our programs. And certainly a lot of that is going on. I think there are opportunities at the state level to incentivize that even more. The other strategy, which would certainly be a carryover, is performance funding. That is provided the economic incentives that has really been a game changer in terms of encouraging are certainly rewarding campuses for seeing post-secondary completion, of underrepresented minority, low-income students, and students as a whole, as well as seeing students progress efficiently through the system. So that is the first objective under this priority area. The second is to really look at transfer, and we want to look at maximizing sort of traditional transfer, what we would think of between KCTCS and our universities, so academic credit. But as we look to 2030, we also want to be thinking about ways that we really maximize credit that students have earned in different places and can apply that to other programs. And it might be experiential credit as well. It might be that a student has had a work experience that directly applies to their academic programs. Well, they should get credit for that in some way. And I think there are ways, at the state level that we can explore that more and engage the campuses in some conversations around that. So that is objective 2. And you see a couple of potential strategy areas under their credit for prior learning, which I just referenced. And degree maps, and Melissa Bell, Dr. Bell and her team have done terrific work in this area. But I think, the more that students understand the pathways, not only to their programs, but through their programs, it really helps them through, particularly if they're transferring from one institution to another. And then the third objective is to ensure that academic offerings are high quality, relevant, and inclusive. And Dr. Thompson, I might put you on the spot just for a minute on this, because I know how central and important this is to your philosophy of education, and the work that you're pressing and encouraging at the state level around the graduate profile and looking at general education, perhaps in different ways. So you may want to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Lee. I do. And I won't make 3 points, but I will make maybe 4. One point being is that we see the power as an example of dual credit on the academic outcomes, GPAs, and a variety of other things for low-income students of color once they get in college. But we don't have enough people going into that. So those offerings need to be far more inclusive. We need to be recruiting far more to go into that pipeline to come in. But we also have so many students that are leaving college because they don't see, quote unquote, the value of college anymore. And this is once they get in. And then we have so many people that don't see the value of college before they get in. So relevancy matters. That's another thing, right? How do we make it relevant up and down the pipeline? A third point is really powerful in my mind. We need to start thinking about what does quality mean. And a way to think about quality is from 2 vantage points. One would be to look at whether our programs have operationalized within them things like employability. So the idea that we want a graduate profile of every one of our students to be one by which that they have many of those employability skills, many of those other items that are located within their degree program that they recognize that are located there. And so that's important. So we're working on a graduate profile that says every Kentucky student will graduate with this set of criteria that everybody will know that they have, the employers as well as the student, him or herself. And the fourth is really important. We can't leave people behind in this process of developing relevancy. They have to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. They have to see themselves reflected in the pedagogy. They have to see themselves reflected in a way that means that we're going to have to do everything from not only looking at our programs to make sure that they are relevant of today's time. In other words, we need to be building programs for the future. That's what this program review helps us to do, and not rebuilding programs of 20 years ago that are obsolete. We also need to make sure that we're developing input from a variety of folks to help us to do that. That's where we need to have more employers get engaged along those lines. but we need to not leave anybody out of this, especially those that have historically been disenfranchised out of this. So inclusivity, my quick analogy, and I'll make it fast, we talk about diversity as an aspect of a population, whatever they're bringing to the table, the differences. So that's it. I use the dance analogy. So that's just inviting everybody to this dance we're talking about here. Asking everybody to dance and being a part of the dance becomes an inclusive way of thinking about how we do this in higher education. Equity means that you look at the particular student where he or she's at and then give them what they need to be successful. And so it's not a one size fits all. It's many sizes fit in one. And so this is the way we are thinking about this as we're building academic programming, but also as we're thinking about how we see ourselves positioning Kentucky in the future to be where we need to be, and not just relying on the past that's telling us that story.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. So these are the three objectives as presented, and I guess I'm going to pitch out some questions to the group. Thinking about these objectives from the perspectives of the various audiences that we want to impact with this agenda, are there things that are confusing, or do the objectives need to be clarified in any way?
I don't know about confusing. I did have a question. The transfer of academic credits from community college to four-year institutions, as I recall, that was quite low, 15% or something. Am I still on track or not?
I don't have the specific statistics in it, and it really depends on how we're defining it. In the current agenda, we are only measuring the transfer of students who actually obtained an associate's degree before they transferred. And I think that's one of the reasons that we might not see the kind of success that we would like. So certainly as we think about how we are defining some of these things, it will matter. And certainly conversations that we want to have with the campuses.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't really have a question as much as objective 3, I think, is just of the utmost importance, because I think the work the CP has done to make college more affordable, they've made great strides in that. But I think that also the biggest aspect that maybe hasn't been discussed in local universities that I haven't heard as much is making sure that you get the bang for your buck, that it is worth the money. So it's not all about the affordability, more so where is your money going? And so I think that it's really huge and really telling that the CP is including that as its own distinct and separate objective.
Thank you, Colby. I fully agree. Any other questions or comments about these objectives before we move on to the next area? Okay, Heather, next slide, please. So the next area we want to talk about is talent. So this is really about thinking about talent broadly. It's certainly about the talent that comes from our student graduates in terms of workforce development and growth. But it's also about the talent that resides in many ways in our campus communities, our faculty, our research expertise, our administrative leadership. All of those things we feel have an opportunity to be brought to bear on Kentucky's economies and the quality of our regions and our communities. And so that's what really this area is about, as Travis talked about earlier. So the two objectives we have in this area are, number one, we want to make sure, and I think this gets to some of the previous comments, to improve career outcomes of post-secondary graduates. So this gets to making sure that programs are relevant, that students are graduating and are able to get jobs, that they have appropriate advising early in their college careers. It's about being able to capture all the various ways that they have collected both academic credit and other experiential credit that might benefit their jobs. So this sort of takes the idea of, making sure that we get more degrees and then thinking about really how are they being applied to Kentucky as a whole and having an impact in Kentucky. And the second objective is really about capturing, I think, the important mission of our colleges and universities around research and service. So, it's the ability of campuses to support strong communities through their various ways of working outside of the academic programs. Certainly the two research campuses, then the work that they do is critical, but we also have strong applied research going on at our universities throughout the state. We also have a range of services and partnerships with business and industry, whether it's emerging business or existing business, that is tremendously important and is not talked about very much. Certainly at the council, probably not talked about as much, and is very important to Kentucky's economy. So as we think about state level strategies to help, Kentucky really capitalize on this amazing talent and the infrastructure, it's clear that we are not doing a great job helping, our state partners know what's going on. I think individual campuses do a good job, but I think there's an opportunity at the state level to really help centralize some of that information and share it more broadly. Another thing that President Thompson has talked about on many occasions is the need to help campuses elevate and differentiate their core strengths. So this is another possible area of state work and strategy, under this objective in the next agenda. So Dr. Thompson, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that, but I'm happy to answer any questions about these two objectives and talk a little bit about some proposed strategies in this area. You're muted, Dr. Thompson.
Sorry. Thanks, Lee. It is important, as you know, all of our campuses have their strengths, but sometimes we end up looking a whole lot like each other, thus in competition with each other, whether we try to do that or not. That's kind of what it ends up being. So we have programs of excellence we had a long time ago, but my argument is that we need to be looking at how can we develop centers of strengths, or whatever we want to call it, in a way that would make people want to come to our campus? How do we make our mission even stronger, right? And then how do we build these relationships with employers, with businesses, and so on? So I don't think of the service region any longer as an example of the way we did before, because we're going to have to recruit out-of-state students and everybody else to help the business model. But I do think of us serving regions, serving communities, serving in a way that is very much the power that we have with so much brain power under our roofs. So how do we do this, I think, becomes really a focus of this agenda. How do we do it in such a way that we can build our campuses to be a stronger entity with a mission that's stronger and more focused in many cases, that would want to make anybody come to it, whether it's at Murray, Moorhead, or Richmond. How do we do that in a manner that truly fosters what we consider to be excellence?
Thank you, President Thompson. Does anybody have any questions about these objectives?
No, other than I totally agree with Aaron, and it would be nice just to have a centralized list of each regional school's outstanding program, that sort of thing, just so that not everybody knows about the aquaculture at KSU, or most people know about some of the space programs at Moorhead, but each school has its own really central, or I say centralized, major or key initiative, and it needs to be more broadly advertised. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Stat. Anybody else?
I had a quick question about objective 2. When you're talking about that, the strong communities and economies, is that strictly for, I don't know how to say this other than the post-graduation, the job market, whether like to start them off while they're in college, getting internships and partnerships with these communities. When I was at Moorhead, we had this whole thing we called closing the gap between campus and community, is what our whole goal of our student government was. And we were convinced that if students had strong ties to the community, they would then in turn be more likely to finish their degree. Retention would rise. So we did a lot of partnerships with the communities, whether that be community service, whether that be different outreach. And so I had a lot of students come to me and say that they secured internships by meeting people in the community at things such as Round County Christmas, where you volunteered your time to buy Christmas presents for low-income people in the community. And so I guess that's a long way to answer my question. I think that it's important to do it based on internships and things, but I also think that if you grow the ties of those students to the community around them, they're going to find more success on the campus itself.
Colby, if it was left up to me, and part of it I think kind of is, that's why we have Rick Smith on board. I like to see every one of our students get an internship, externship, co-op, or something either in high school or college before they actually graduate from college. It is a powerful way of thinking about building a pipeline to the workforce. First of all, it's a powerful way of thinking about student success. There's more relevancy there. It's a powerful way also to look at this relationship between higher education and economic development. So all of the things you're saying, absolutely, I would love to see all of our students have that by, or in the process of getting that by 2030.
I know Lee and I have talked about it a little bit, but where do apprenticeships fit into this in the trades?
Same thing, Dr. Stat. I mean, it is the same. It is a work-based learning in many cases, though they get paid for it. So it fits in very well in this process. And I think it has to be another focus that we have in many ways that Mr. Nelson was bringing up earlier. So yes.
Are there any other thoughts or questions or comments about these two objectives before we move on to the last priority area? If not, Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm muted. The final area, the objectives here focus on the value of post-secondary education. And if you've spent any time around Dr. Thompson, you know this is near and dear to his heart. Higher education matters, right? And it matters to the state of Kentucky and to individuals and to communities. And so often I think, you know, we're really dealing with a lot of messages that are coming at people around about the value of the trades. And maybe you don't need to go to college because of the trades. And we just have so much work to do to show people that that is college. And, you know, also that there's more than one way to succeed, right? And there's a lot of different post-secondary opportunities. So the first objective is increase the public belief in the power of post-secondary education. And the second objective is to build support for greater investment in post-secondary education. So on the first objective, the Higher Education Matters campaign, which we've carried out through social media primarily, and through publications and communications with our partners and webinars in a variety of ways, that we want to really ramp that up and continue that effort. We want Dr. Thompson to go back out into the communities for a second round of listening and educating people about the value of college. And we may have other strategies there as well. And objective 2 on building support, really that's, I think, one of the crucial ways we know that education has value is in the amount of state general fund appropriations that we get for higher education. So, this captures our role to advocate for those resources and also to think about alternate ways to fund education, and some innovative ways here. Also to continue, as we mentioned before, the research that we do that shows the value, the return on investment for students. So does anybody have any comments about this final priority area and the objectives? Is there anything that isn't clear? Anything that you feel like needs greater clarity? Nothing, Dr. Stat? You usually have a comment.
Okay, not right off, I don't, but just thinking about it, this is the ROI research, that sort of thing. You've done some very good work already on it. We just need to get better exposure of some of the things that we have done.
Well, and I think on objective one, I like to see the word value in there as well. It's the power and the value of post-secondary education. Dr. said that's why I was thinking is the ROI. We know it, but I think it's chipping away at the perception, the degrading perception that secondary education just not worth it. Right? Colby kind of touched on it. Dr. Sad, you kind of touched on it, and I think we need a bold, loud campaign to counter that, because it is worth it. Absolutely worth it.
And actually, we had a staff comment that I think isn't really captured here. We should have probably had that. We can have that discussion. But I think one of our staff members thought belief was the wrong word and really wanted it to be more about providing evidence of the of the value of post-secondary. So, if you all like that working better, we can kind of take that and tweak it. So it's something about provide evidence, to support or
demonstrate the value.
Demonstrate the value of post-secondary.
Well, let me say this. I mean, I like both of the words, but I think they mean different things. We talk with people with a post-secondary degree that's doing very well financially because of that, but still don't believe it's valuable for other people. So I would make sure that evidence is a word that I like, as you all know. I believe we just don't talk about stuff. We prove it through research and data. That's why I very seldom talk about stuff I can't back up. But also there is a mentality or a belief system that we're going to have to change somewhat that is there even with evidence in place. So I would want to somehow capture both. I'm not saying we can or can't, but Lee's probably hoping I'll shut up now. But so there is two pieces to that puzzle. And Chair Menser, I think your point's well taken.
There's one other aspect here to me that where some of this public belief comes in or evidence. There's some naysayers out there on the power of post-secondary because they chose very poor majors, that sort of thing, that the employability isn't all that good and what have you. So that's, I think, where some of the naysayers are coming from.
I would like to see under the public awareness campaign a lot more personal narratives of personal successes, but more so than that, when I've talked to various students throughout, they don't only want to know a personal experience, but I think Dr. Thompson mentioned a little bit, just because it's succeeded for some people, a lot of people will say, oh, but that's just that person. That's that type of person. They came from a different community, a different socioeconomic background. So I'd like to see a lot of personal narratives, but from different people. So like for the public awareness campaign into these lower income areas and these regional areas, push a success story of somebody that's from that area, from that exact same socioeconomic background. If you're a family of immigrants, I want to see a very successful immigrant who found success through Kentucky higher education and push those into those communities to those individuals. Because it's very easy to say that was just an isolated success story if you don't personally identify with that person and that background.
Colby, I really appreciate that comment. I think that's so powerful. I think that that's always something that we have, we strive to do, but we can always do more of. I know one of the things that we piloted with some adult learners was an ambassador program. So you're really developing a core of people who can serve as examples and people who are really outside of the educational system, but in that person's orbit that say this is important and this is why it's important and this worked for me. And, somebody really who can speak to the power of college. And it's somebody that is in that person's orbit and they identify with. So, we could even think about that on a broader scale of trying to get all of these people to be champions and mentors and examples of what that looks like for people in their community.
Mr. Burks, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's called emotional intelligence. Every time I speak, especially young people, I say, know your story, tell your story, because stories connect in many ways, much deeper, much more complete than the data. One is building your IQ, the other is building your EQ. And I think we need to have all of that. And we also need to tell the stories of others, which builds your SQ, right? Your social intelligence. So I think you're right. We need to cover all the intelligences in this category because I think it is the overarching category. I think it is the big one. And so I appreciate that statement about emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that another way we know that stories are important is because when you think about sort of the alternate narrative, that college isn't important, that trades are more important, that people go away to college and they become a different person and, they lose their values. Like all of that is anecdotal. It's not really supported by a lot of facts. It's people's stories, but it has power. And so we just have to combat those stories with positive stories.
Melissa, on that note, I think we also have, like Dr. Thompson mentioned, the data to back that up, because usually that alternate narrative is usually an outlier story, right? Like a student who learned to weld in high school and ended up making, six figures after. And so they use that as justification to say that higher education doesn't matter, but now we can tell that story and then also back it up with central tendency and show that data that, that isn't an outlier story, that's typical, for a student. So I think the combination of those two are very important.
Are there any other questions regarding this area of the agenda or any questions about these two objectives? If not, Chair Harper, this concludes the staff sort of overview and review of the proposed objectives. As we mentioned before, we will be bringing these back. They'll probably be changed a bit based on your input and others. And we'll ask you to more formally adopt them at the August 31st meeting.
Great.
Can I just say that to me, excellent work, and the discussion has been very, very productive today. So I appreciate it myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stat.
All right, thank you. So just to kind of lay out where we're going and how we move forward. Again, take this information that was provided today. Just if you think of something else, please feed that information to the staff as they look to tweak and add. So at our next scheduled meeting, which is August 31st, we'll approve the objectives and review the proposed state level strategies and to begin looking at key performance indicators. So this meeting will also include our regular business, such as new academic programs and other academic initiatives. The Campus Advisory Committee We'll meet twice in September to focus in on the key performance indicators and context metrics that the staff will finalize for our approval in late October. Given the rest of the schedule that you see displayed, are there members of this committee comfortable with the remaining meetings that we have left, or is there a desire to schedule an additional meeting in mid-September to review the metric progress?
I should add too that this committee will be presenting an update to the full board at the September 14th board meeting. So that would be another sort of touch base on this work that you'll be sharing with the rest of the board.
Does the committee think we need a mid-September meeting? Okay. Given no comments, then again, to the staff, great work. You all are the success behind what's happening here. So thank you very much for your time and energy. Thank you to the committee members for your time today. Any other additional comments before we close? Okay, then I propose that the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.